As much as we all like to rip on men, this is time to take some accountability.
So you're a feminist, right?
Sure, if you want to classify it that way.
Well, are you not a feminist?
Probably not in your definition. I care for like gender liberation. So
Gender, what's that?
Just equality and equity for everyone, no matter your gender identity.
So you think feminism is not about gender equality?
Well,
what
feminism historically, if we are talking about like first wave, second wave, third wave, had super specific like reason and outcome, like gaining the right to vote and owning banks and property and stuff like that, or their own bank account. I think now we're in a different situation where we have, in a lot of ways, equal rights legally, but I think socially, women and men suffer in the structure that we have right now. So I'm pro gender liberation. So for everyone.
Okay. I think some people, and what do you think about, are you in favor of deconstructing or dismantling the patriarchy?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So what do you suggest we replace it with? Matriarchy? Because that won't work.
Right. I would consider you a feminist then.
Okay.
This is perhaps going back to your argument about how net positive, right? So probably this is within the feminist purview. You might agree with the following statement, like women are a victim of violent crime at men's hands. This is especially prevalent in like SA statistics and other sort of forms of like sexual violence and just interpartner violence in relationships, right? Would you say it would be a net positive? So for example, you could probably get rid of most of this, at least within your worldview, if you just got rid of men entirely. Would that then be a net positive to just get rid of all men?
No. I mean, technically, sure, if all the men weren't there, then who's doing the violent crimes and acts? Mm-hmm. Sure, but I think men are just as much of a victim in the structure that we have now.
You're a victim. Here we go, CSI.
And that causes them to commit the violence, suppressing your emotions from a young age, putting specific roles on men as man of the house and man up and stuff like that. They tend to act out violently because they can't express their emotions, or they don't have a space like women do to where like we're known as being emotional, and like so we can kind of have that space together. Not that we're not judged for it, but still we're able to without.
Or maybe it's just biology. Men are just designed to be more aggressive. That's it.
Being emasculated. So although men are the oppressors, it doesn't mean that they themselves aren't victims at the hands of the patriarchy too.
All right. I might get into some of that stuff a little bit later on in the show, but you said men are oppressors?
Yes.
And women are what?
You're a victim. Here we go.
The oppressed.
So just so I fully understand, men are oppressors collectively as a group.
Mm-hmm.
How?
Okay, and women are oppressed collectively as a group.
Yes.
Okay, and you're a woman?
Yes.
Okay, are you oppressed?
As a woman. Yes, we live under a patriarchy, so sure.
But how specifically are you oppressed?
I think the main ways that I see it in my daily life is like the hypersexualization of women.
What? Nobody has a gun to your head telling you to over-sexualize yourself. You choose that on your own accord. You guys sign up for OnlyFans and you wear the mini skirts. That's on y'all.
Mm-hmm. Men aren't sexualized in such a way, and then the commodification of that sexualization. So corn and OnlyFans, and it's seen as kind of like women empowerment, but I think it's just teetering a dangerous line of just like becoming that role of women in society.
Would you say the hypersexualization of women, and you said this applies to you yourself, is this systemic or is this on individual level?
I think it's systemic. The existence of corn and OnlyFans affects every woman, no matter if they participate in that activity
But wouldn't these industries also systemically impact men?
In what ways?
Well, you said OnlyFans, corn, they systemically impact women, but then I would argue they systemically also would impact men.
I think so
then,
too.
So then men are oppressed systemically because of OnlyFans.
Yes, I'm not saying men have the ability to be the oppressors. I'm not saying that they aren't also oppressed in their own way as well.
Okay.
But it's at the hands of themselves almost, because they have the power to oppress and they're kind of putting it upon themselves.
I don't think she knows what she's talking about, folks. She's pulling off one of the world's greatest word salads.
Can you clarify?
Not individually. Just kind of the bro-pilled ideology of like man up and get in the gym and this is what women want to see, and it's like all kind of they're not talking to women to see what women really want. They're just discussing amongst other men.
What is she even complaining about right now? She's talking about how guys do this whole bro code thing where we tell each other to get in the gym and improve and how to get women, but we never discuss with them. But why would we need to discuss with them when they're always voicing what they want? We already know what you want. It's not a mystery.
Wait, you think going to the gym is...
No, I'm just saying this idea.
Why did you mention the gym though? What does that have to do with...
Because I'm thinking about the internet and how that kind of gym content kind of pushes you into this field of like bettering yourself, but then you get into like these conservative...
Are you against men bettering themselves?
No, I'm just saying it's kind of like a rabbit hole that you go into on the internet.
Wait, physical fitness is a rabbit hole for extremist right-wing propaganda?
Yes.
That's got to be one of the dumbest viewpoints I've heard on this show in a minute.
Strength training, weightlifting is...
A lot of the times,
is a slippery slope to right-wing propaganda.
Yes. Because think of like Andrew Tate, like he's all about self-betterment and all of those kinds of things, and that's super similar.
Do you know that Hitler was also a vegetarian? Do you think like vegetarians?
I'm talking about media as it is now, not simply because you go in the gym and get stronger to better yourself. You become. I'm saying like the pipeline on the internet is kind of algorithmically leads you there.
Yeah, but just because Andrew Tate advocates for like strength training and getting in physical shape, I don't think you can draw from that then, any sort of advocation towards increasing your health or physical strength would indicate that you're like going to go down some like right-wing.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's mainly what I've witnessed.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you think that your scope is a bit, it's just a bit narrow-minded? And I'm sorry, like it's a little awkward.
No, that's fine.
Nothing against you.
No.
But, because of social media, right? Like for example, if I only watch the Whatever podcast, I may think, all people think in this particular manner, right? Sorry, I wasn't speaking in the microphone. If I'm only seeing Andrew Tate, and my algorithm pops up more stuff like that, right? And I don't agree with that, I might think that all men operate in a certain way, when in actuality, that's not the case whatsoever, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of what I hear you saying is very, very negative towards men. And I happen to think that men are actually pretty incredible. And if you have time to look at all that they really do bring to the table, I think they bring so much more than we do.
What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
Because we are very emotionally minded, we think of me, and so on and so forth. And I know that's
like
kind of
women, you're saying?
Women, right? And I know it's kind of going away a little bit from what you're saying, but I just think that, if you're seeing particular algorithms, especially with social media, then we have this idea that all men are a certain way, when in actuality, that's not the case.
Yeah. I don't think all men are a certain way. I was just drawing kind of a correlation between men's betterment and improvement and getting in the gym. I see strongly correlated to red pill ideologies online.
But what is the problem with, and I don't actually know specifically what red pill ideology is. That like it's basically like the conservative view. Would you agree that it's more that route?
Yes.
And have you taken time to look at what the conservative view actually is when it comes to as society as a whole? And how it contributes to our children and the betterment of society?
Yes. I just kind of disagree with placing binary roles onto people. I think it's dangerous for society, and I think that's why the suicide rates are exponentially increasing. So I just kind of...
So it's dangerous to be a traditional person because it's correlated to suicide rates. She's just talking out of her ass, bro.
Disagree with the idea that men should act a certain way and women should act a certain way. And when I see these types of things perpetuated online, I think that's dangerous, especially when it's kind of strung up as self-improvement and betterment, when it's just kind of like, this is how a man should act. I just think that's dangerous.
I want to let
So it's dangerous for a man to act like a man, and it's also dangerous for a woman to act like a woman. I'm not making this shit up.
let Savannah come in here, because Savannah, you describe yourself as feminist worst nightmare.
Yeah.
You've been listening to what she said. She said, I don't want to mischaracterize your argument, but you're saying that the gender roles, or perhaps traditional gender roles when it comes to men and women, these are harmful, can be harmful. Is that a fair recap of your position?
Yes, it can be harmful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
So I would agree with you that I think most men that weightlift are conservative. And I think that there's a reason that most men that weightlift are conservative. Like, generally speaking, I think conservatives take better care of themselves. I've never really seen a liberal with a ton of muscle. I think that they're mostly like skinny, weak men. There is that stigma, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like the conservative movement, especially with Make America Healthy Again, has pushed that, of course, because our side actually wants people to weightlift, to eat healthier, to stop taking medicine, and the liberal side doesn't want that. So I think that that's not a bad thing for men to be conservative and manly and masculine and weightlift. Would you disagree?
No, I won't disagree. I was just saying there is a correlation there, is all I was saying, which you agreed with.
Yeah, I agree with that correlation, actually. I just don't think that it's a bad thing. I actually encourage men to weightlift. I think that they should have muscle on their bodies. I think that they should be able to protect their families and have like muscle and strength.
But hey, according to her, your ideas are dangerous.
Right?
Yes, I agree. I don't think just men. I advocate for health for everyone. I think maybe we see more conservatives with a lot of muscle or into bodybuilding more than maybe people on the left, because the left seems to be more interested in academia. When we look at demographics in universities, they're getting degrees more, and they happen to be Democrats, registered Democrats, rather than Republicans type thing. So I think it's just more of like a social area where, like, if you're conservative, this is your crowd you hang out with, y'all go to the gym. And I think it stems from that binary role of men being strong and protectors and wanting to protect the house and things like that.
But you think that binary roles are dangerous?
If you push them onto everyone, I think if you want to do that in your own time and your own household, I think if you look at someone who doesn't fit into that binary or gender identity and you say, this is how you should act, man up, I think that can be dangerous.
You see, this is my problem with the left and their liberal ideas. They just want to float through life with no standards, no pressure, no sense of urgency. And it just makes no sense. Like, could you imagine everybody doing that? Society wouldn't work.
So you think telling men to weightlift is dangerous?
No,
All
not
men.
to weightlift, just like man up, like emotionally specifically.
I would just...
Could you tell me exactly what the problem would be if I told a man to man up? Would you like him to stay a little boy for the rest of his life?
disagree with that. I think that the reason that we don't live in a society with a bunch of masculine and strong men is because we haven't been telling them that for the past, since first wave feminism started. We haven't been telling men to man up and get in the gym and eat healthier and
You think
get
men
a job.
aren't as manly now, is what you're saying?
I would like everybody to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I was just clarifying. I agree too, but I completely agree, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
Really?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you want to get married one day.
It's not really on my...
You see, you're talking to a woman that's out of nature. She doesn't want to get married. She doesn't want to have kids, most likely. So what can we actually learn from her?
Hypothetically speaking, if you were to be, choosing your husband, would you rather have a man who has a lot of muscle and he's masculine and he provides for you and he takes care of the children and he's the head of the household? Or would you rather have somebody who's passive, feminine, weak-minded, doesn't really look super masculine and manly?
It's all personal preference. I would like a partner who we have equal responsibilities together. If we're talking physique, I do go for, honestly, I want to say I want a tall man with muscles, but I tend to not go for that. But yes, like idealistically.
It's sad what brainwashing can do to you. Her feminist mind is telling her that these conservative men with muscles that can protect her are bad men and she should hate them. But her heart and biology is telling her that she wants these men. It's a real conflict of interest.
Wait, let's explore that a little bit. So you said your own preferences, right?
Yes.
So you said you would like a guy who's tall and with muscles.
Yes.
Okay, have you dated tall men with muscles?
Maybe once.
Just once?
Yeah.
Okay, you were in a 3-year relationship. How would you describe him physically?
He was taller than me and he went to the gym regularly.
So your longest relationship, was that the guy who was tall and muscular?
No, that wasn't the guy I was referencing.
Well, you said he went to the gym though.
Yes.
Okay. Well, when we say muscular, I mean, was he athletic? Was he in good shape?
Athletic? He was getting there, yeah. He went to the gym regularly.
Okay.
But also, again, this is personal preference. I don't think we should force every man to have to be this protector of the household and stuff like that.
I think we should.
I think it leads to the downfall. Like we may not see, or people may not see this in the immediate, but I mean, it's already here. But long term, I mean, you're looking at really the downfall of society in a sense, not just that alone, but, and I don't disagree that like women should be able to do, all of these things as well. Right. However, we've taken women out of the home. Other people are taking care of our kids. I mean, I can tell you firsthand, even though there was another man in the house, I essentially raised my son, and I'm an emotional person. And I can tell you without going into detail that I have an emotional 22-year-old who is not a man.
Damn, she threw her own son under the bus. Sheesh.
And we see it all around us. We have, this lack of masculinity, and I think that it's being looked at as like it's a bad thing to be masculine and a caretaker, and to, even if you want your wife or your significant other to stay at home or things like that. I think when you look as a whole to society, you see why it's necessary. Even if, like for me, that means I might have to give up things I want, because there are certain things that I like. Like I don't necessarily want to be at home all the time. But if it's for the greater good, then I would forego that. And I think we have to consider the betterment of society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's also because, like we were talking about earlier, women are naturally more emotional. And then we know that men, they're just built stronger. So it's like men should work on that like privilege, like that benefit that they already have, that they're stronger so they can take care of the house, like whenever there's anything that's physical that's needed. And then women like us, we should be more with the kids, like in tune with them and like talking about these emotional things and helping them to overcome like certain troubles. You know what I mean?
Yes, I agree. For your gender role, you're better off leaning into your strengths than your weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Jazz, I think you're going to probably disagree with her. She said, I'm just repeating it, that women are more emotional. Do you disagree with that?
No, I think women are more emotional.
But wouldn't that be in contradiction of your, wouldn't that be in contradiction of your whole rejection of the gender binary?
So there's a biological and genetic predispositions between the genders. So there are differences between men and women biologically and genetically.
At least she can admit that part.
The way we think, our testosterone, our hormones, sure. But I think nurture has a lot more to do with how we turn out rather than our nature. But I think the way that gender exists right now in such binary roles, we're perpetuating our nature. And I think that's dangerous because there are a lot of gender identities that exist with outside of the binary. So I think it's very limiting to the human experience to say that because we're naturally this way, we should exasperate those differences and not kind of go outside of those binaries, because we can. We just choose not to and think it's better
So essentially, do you care like about the traditional gender roles that we have already? Like, does it matter for a man to be like going to the gym and stuff like that? And does it matter for a woman to be at home cooking, taking care of the kids, or it's like the roles can be switched and there's like nothing wrong with that?
I see a lot of relationships where the man is kind of the stay-at-home husband and roles are reversed. There's a really popular couple on TikTok, lady with red hair, and her husband like cooks for her all day and she pays him to do that.
What? Doesn't that sound strange to you? She pays her husband to cook for her? What kind of arrangement is that?
I think if that works for them, that works for them. But I do want to go back to something you were saying about how you raised your son on your own and you're a woman and we're more emotional. There are statistics to back that up, that children that are raised with just the mom in the house aren't as well equipped socially in society as if they're raised with just a single dad. And I don't think that's because women are incapable of giving that. I think the way society is constructed, women have to rely on men so much that when the man is missing, then we kind of fail in a sense. And I think that that's wrong. I think we have just as much as an ability to raise somebody, but in the way that we structure gender now in society, it makes us kind of incapable and unable to.
I don't disagree that we are not capable of raising children on our own. But I'll speak for myself.
Yeah.
So I'm more likely as a mother, as a woman, to give into things that a father would say, no, things are going to be this way and this is how it's going to go. Whereas I'm going to cave into things, or because my marriage was a particular way, I felt like I had to make up for those things by allowing things I should not have allowed. There's definitely, mothers out there who can be very strong, logical, make those decisions and stick to those decisions. But by nature, we are not necessarily like that. And I can see it with my daughter's father. There's times where I think, oh, he's being mean. And then, but, over the last few years, as I've come into realizing that there's order for a purpose, I see where it's okay if dad sounds mean, or, if he's more demonstrative and things like that. So I've come to actually appreciate that and understand the need for it, because I couldn't do that on my own. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are times where my kid does something wrong and I'm going to raise my voice and I'm going to be very firm and this is going to be what it is. But ultimately, generally speaking, a man serves a different purpose, right? We complement each other. And so I do think that, I could go into, the whole feminist, the origins of feminism, not the origins, but some of the reasons behind it is pulling the woman out of the home and creating this disharmony for our children. And again, I went to school, I worked, full time. I was not a stay-at-home mom. And if I had it to go back to do again, despite the fact that, I would have craved more intellectual stimulation than mm-hmm. being at home all day, I would have done it because I think ultimately it would have been the best thing to do for, at least for my son.
It's the yin and yang effect, okay? When you're raising a child, you need the balance of two forces, two energies, okay? You have your mother here, the nurturer, she lets you get away with things. And then you have the father here that sets the order, that stays firm, that roars like the lion, and everybody listens. You need that. When you're developing a child, you need a wholeness. You can't just be one-sided.
Yeah.
With my daughter, I would, situation's different, but I would love to do it for her as well.
Mm-hmm. I just would disagree that it's purely nature is the reason that these are the outcomes. I think we perpetuate our genetic differences so much in societal roles that women are incapable in certain areas, like you said, to say no and to do the dad role. And I think it's because we push those roles so much, when if we kind of destructured the way that we had gender identities, then women could be a whole person in a way, and men could also cater to people emotionally and on a...
She's trying to say that it's not biology, it's more about deconstructing gender roles, But wouldn't it be smarter just to work together, man and woman, to raise the child in a family setting?
Different
But
level.
I think that it's always been this way. Like, I'll even grant that if you go way back into ancient societies, if you want to talk about genders and such, there's old or ancient societies that had multiple genders, right? But setting that aside, if you look back at all throughout time, women had a particular role, men had a particular role. And it's actually, instead of, I think it gets demonized, but in actuality, it's a really beautiful thing. And we're trying to change it to fit this new box that's been created. And I just think order exists for a reason. I'm not, nothing against particular people or anything like that. But I can say that, and it doesn't have to be my age. It could just be, the fact that I've learned a little bit more over the last few years. I just think it all serves a purpose. Once you see things, they all fall in line, instead of trying to, like, having a Rubik's Cube and trying to make all these pieces fit when they don't really fit. It just seems to be that way. I don't,
I agree. I like order. I like tradition. I like the way that humans progressed over time. But this new generation, they don't see like that. They see that everything that we did in the past was wrong and we need to dismantle it and do something else.
I would like to go back to what you said about pushing traditional roles on men and women is dangerous. But we actually, in the past, 20 years or so, we haven't been pushing those traditional roles on men and women. We've actually been doing the opposite, and society has gone downhill. So how can you say that pushing traditional roles are dangerous when we've done the opposite and no good has come from it?
In what ways do you think we're all of a sudden not pushing gender norms and roles onto people? And in what ways do you think society is being negatively affected?
So as far as not pushing traditional roles on people, right? Like, I think as women, we are told now and in this century that our career, our degree, our title is more valuable than being a wife and a mother. We're told that, like, we essentially have no value. And I can attest to that because I post all the time about my lifestyle on social media, and I post that I don't have a college degree and I don't necessarily have, like, a stable career. And I get a lot of backlash for that. And a lot of people will say, well, you don't really have any, like, value to you. You're not smart. You don't have a degree. You don't have a title. And on men, you said it, like, they're basically told that they have toxic masculinity if they want to be strong men and they want to be masculine. So I actually think that we've done the opposite, and we haven't pushed traditional roles on men and women. And that's why you see women becoming more masculine and you see men becoming more feminine.
So do you think that all women should be in the house and taken care of?
I don't necessarily think that all women need to be stay-at-home wives and mothers. In Savannah's perfect world, I wouldn't make women go work 9-to-5 corporate jobs that are literally just not good for their hormones. They're being, bossed around by a boss all day. I don't think it's healthy for women. So in my perfect world, if women wanted to work, they would either go the entrepreneurial route or they would work until they became mothers and then stayed home with the children. But there is a lot of evidence that moms that stay home with their children, the children generally do better in society. So I would say, yes, it's important once you have kids to figure out how to stay home with kids. I don't think that we need two incomes in today's society. I think that, we're a society that chases after so many materialistic things, and we need 2 cars and we need this crazy mortgage and we need designer bags and we need 3 vacations a year. I don't think that that's 100% necessary, but society pushes it to where both men and women have to have an income to raise a family. I think traditional roles would actually help families. It would bring back the nuclear family to society. I think it's you see the birth rate, like it's plummeted. That's not helpful for any society. If it keeps plummeting, we're never going to actually, like, grow our population.
Let me ask you this. If a white person had one or more negative encounters with someone who's black or some other minority group, it could be Latino, it could be Asian, and then they become racist towards that minority group, you would then, I assume you would give them some, you would understand their racism because of their own negative experiences with that racial group?
I would be like, I understand the sentiment, sure, but you also need to realize that race is socially constructed as well. So if you're having similar experiences with a certain race, it's because of our class structure. You know what I mean? I mean, this is a totally different conversation, but again, it's just another social construct. So it's way more nuanced, and I would understand the sentiment of them deciding to be racist or whatnot, but I think that they just lack an understanding of the structure that we live under.
And this would also apply to females who are misandrist.
Yes, and I applied them equally, yeah.
But would you give the same sort of leeway when it comes to misandrist statements made by women as you would to someone who's, say, like a member of the KKK, and this person themselves has had numerous, maybe they were victims of violent crime, maybe a family member was murdered by somebody of a racial minority? Would you then give them a pass for their racism because of their own lived experience?
Again, I'm not giving a pass to any of these. I'm just saying I understand the sentiment, but you're misunderstanding the structures of society.
Okay. And then to dive a little deeper on that, if we were to look at, for example, would you say in the same way there's a differential between men and women? You're saying, well, misogyny worse than misandry. Let's say there's a black person who's had negative encounters with white people, and then that black person has prejudice or bigotry towards white people because of their lived experiences. Would you say that you might not even categorize it as racism, but I'll just, for the simplicity, I'll just say they're prejudiced towards white people. Would it be less harmful than on the individual level than if there was a white person who held racist or bigoted prejudiced beliefs, even if that white person had just as bad or even worse violent encounters where they were the victim of a black person?
The way I see it, black people shouldn't get a pass for being racist or prejudiced. If you have the same tendencies as a white supremacist, I'm gonna call you a black supremacist.
Yeah, I think racism against black people is on a social and structural scale. So an outlier offense of a black person committing some violence against a white person or just being prejudiced or racist against white people doesn't have the same effect as when white people who are the oppressors or have some sort of higher social status in society were to be racist against a minority or people who are already disenfranchised.
To me, that doesn't make any sense and is not productive, because you're just giving a special privilege to black people to go and shit on white people anytime they want and get away with it. And that's not good for both races.
Gotcha. And you mentioned like white people being the oppressors, but I don't know if there's any intersection here. So what if like the wealthiest, let's say Barack Obama walks up to a white person who's like a janitor and just starts beating the shit out of the janitor because he's white? Would you say that, mind you, Barack Obama, former president of the United States, he's like extremely wealthy. He has, I would say, even though he's the ex-president of the United States, probably like substantial amounts of power in varying degrees. I could even make the scenario when he was the president where he's the leader of the most powerful nation in the world, and he walks up to the White House janitor who happens to be white and just starts beating him up because he's white. Would that still fall under your system of like, well, this is not really as bad or as racist because there's a system that says that like when a black person is a perpetrator against a white person, it's not like as bad?
I'm against violence again in any circumstance. I think independently, obviously that's wrong of them to do, but I am saying that a black person saying that they don't like white people is different than white people saying they don't like black people because of the social status differences.
But what about your intersectionality? So you would then have to factor in like social class, these sorts of things.
Yes, all of it includes.
I think you would probably agree that Barack Obama is like higher in terms of...
This is an extreme independent scenario. And
yeah, I know, but it's just, I'm just testing out your logic here.
I'm talking about the whole structure of race, not just like independent. I mean, you can point out any kind of outlier. And
well, I think the individual is the ultimate minority. So I think I would agree with you, like when it comes to socioeconomic status, white people are probably doing better socioeconomically, so it's generally speaking, than black people.
So it's more of an implication, and kind of more extreme when white people say they hate black people, rather than, well, you think it's less justified for black people to hate white people, or you think it's...
Hate is hate, regardless of what color you are, because we're both equal under the eyes of God.
It's more
I think it's
justified.
equally bad.
Okay.
I think it's
even though that there's
equally
even though
bad.
there's a difference in socioeconomic.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
But this would just come down to intersectionality and the ultimate. So you would be like, okay, well, let's look at their socioeconomic status. Let's look at are they able-bodied? Let's look at, are they a man or a woman? Let's look at their skin color. Let's look at their race. You'd look at all these varying factors, and I would just bring it down to the ultimate minority group, which is the individual. So on the individual level, you'd have to look at the totality of circumstances between each person. And I can give you examples where, like, if you have one black person versus one white person, where the intersectionality of like their respective privileges and disadvantages, where the black person is more privileged than that specific white person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just categorically reject that, like, the entire system would be completely irrelevant to the individual encounter. It wouldn't have any bearing whatsoever.
Okay.
Okay.
Way to the panel. It's nice to meet you all. My name is Andrew Wilson.
Hi, Andrew.
Andrew.
You look very well groomed tonight.
I was a little late because I was catching up on my beauty sleep. As you can see, I definitely need more of that. So, but that's why I was a little late.
You look great. What are you talking about?
Agreed, but I could look even greater.
He shaved his beard.
Yeah, you shaved it up. You were looking a little rough last week on the debates.
Yeah, I was looking a little homeless. I agree. And it would seem that keeping marriages intact would be a better idea for society, or at least
some of them have good outcomes. Some blended families, some of them have good outcomes. A lot of, there's a presumption here that divorce leads to cohabitation in abusive households. There are a lot of divorces that result in 2 happy homes.
No, there's not. Well, here's the thing. There are cases where that is true, and I wouldn't dispute that. Again, I'm not putting things in a monolith. Okay. But generally speaking, it is not actually good for the children to come from broken homes. Most children from broken homes have way worse outcomes than children who are not in broken homes. Mm-hmm. And if children are raised in cohabitation homes, they have way worse outcomes. In fact, you can look at things like this one blew my mind. If you have 2 parents who are abusive to their kids, mm-hmm. and then the state comes in and removes those children from the abusive household, they're actually far, far more likely to die in state custody than if you had left them in the abusive home.
Well, damn, that's how bad state custody is? They need to reform.
Yeah, because they've just been ripped away from their biological parents.
Another foster.
Well, right. You see, but you see how divorce rips you away from your biological parents.
Well, it depends on the
custody
arrangement.
Exactly. Exactly. Like you're saying, it depends on the exactly.
But
no, it doesn't depend. If your mommy and daddy don't live with you anymore, right? You're ripped away from one of them or the other of them at any given time. So if you're with mom for 2 weeks and then you're with dad for 2 weeks, or you're with them every other week, right? You're missing time with one of them. Necessarily. It's a necessary condition of divorce. You're ripped away from your parents. Necessary condition. There's no way around it. For all cases, every single case, unless you were to have some bizarre case where the mom and dad divorce and then stay in the same home for the purpose of kids, that's happened before. And those kids even seem to have better outcomes, which is interesting.
$100. Dear Granny, why are you so aggressive? This toxic femininity is very dangerous.
Quick response. Do you want to respond to that?
A granny? I'm not a fucking granny, dude. I've got a 15-year-old. Who's a fucking granny around here?
Excuse
you.
Sorry, Andrew.
Damn, she is super aggressive. I wasn't expecting all that.
You were didn't mean to cut you off there, Andrew. Do you want to finish your point, but then we'll move it on?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, what so often happens.
Sorry.
What so often happens is the sum all categorization, which is incorrect, and most people argue from this, which is just silly, right? It's like, if you say generally speaking, it is the case that the sun will be shining tomorrow in Santa Barbara. I am correct that is true, But you could still have a sunrise in Santa Barbara and not see it because it's an overcast day, right? It's like, I wouldn't put it at anything in a monolith that way. But we can still look at outcomes, general outcomes of society, and everything policy-wise is a give or take. You're taking from this group, and this group is going to be disproportionately affected. That's politics 101. There's no way to placate everybody. But we still know exactly what's good for the social adjustment of a society. Like that's not even in question. We have 2,000 years of history to look at to know what are social goods inside of society and what aren't.
All right.
But the problem is modern women hate history and want to create a new future.
Quick question for you, Jazz. We won't linger on it long. You're a feminist, but you raised your hand for almost every single one. When it came to men should pay for first dates, you raised your hand. Men should be providers. Men should be providers. Men should open car doors. Men should be chivalrous. Men should observe the sidewalk rule. How do you reconcile being a feminist and your description of this is how we got kind of sidetracked. We weren't really talking about equal rights, but you were making the argument that, well, societally, in terms of gender expectations, gender norms, there's like negative gender expectations on men, negative gender expectations on women. You yourself seem to perpetuate traditional gender norms in terms of your dating prospects. Mm-hmm. So how do you reconcile being a feminist, being in favor of sort of dismantling gender norms, gender expectations, but on the individual personal level, you hold men to said traditional gender roles?
Yes. So we do exist in society, and men are the perpetrators in violence against women. So I do need a protector, especially how we condition gender to be. Men are stronger. Again, if you want to go the nature route and biological route, they have higher levels of testosterone, so they can gain more muscle and all of these things. So in a sense, yeah, when we live in reality, and I do need a protector, because of the circumstances, yes, I would like somebody who fits that role personally. But I do think that it is negative to push that when it comes to wanting the outcome of gender liberation on a grand scale. It is negative to put
gender liberation. Why would the majority of men not want to be men? What's the alternative? We all put on skirts and start acting like women? Get the hell out of here with all that.
Push roles like that.
Wait a second. You don't need that.
What do you mean?
Why do you need that?
Protection?
Why do you need that? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious if we look at the statistics when it comes to violence between genders.
You want us to believe that you're selecting men based on the fact that they can protect you, not because you find that attractive, but because you just find it to be utilitarian.
I think there might be a little bit of both. Sure, that it is.
Why would
attractive.
you be attracted to that?
Yeah, you're gonna go like the biological and genetic route with this, and sure.
When you make an appeal, you say that it's somewhat bad or somehow bad or should not happen that men don't show expressive emotion. That seemed to be one of the key points that you were pointing out in your essay. But there's a problem there, which is I think you just kind of fundamentally misunderstand what masculinity and femininity are. And that's what blank slate theory is. It's saying that masculinity and femininity are just social traits which are conditioned by the environment. That's what you believe. But that's not the case. And here's why that's not the case. Masculinity and femininity revolve around the idea of virtues. The way that we assign what is masculine is based along virtues, things like courage, for instance. For women, maybe it would be along the lines of chastity, right? The reason you assign these to men and women is because if there is a lack of one in one sex versus the other, the social conditions of society begin to deteriorate rapidly. So if women aren't chaste, the social conditions of society actually deteriorate far more rapidly than if men aren't chaste. However, if women lost all courage tomorrow, the societal conditions would deteriorate less rapidly than if men lost all courage tomorrow. That's why it's the case that femininity and masculinity must be tied to virtues and always have been. It's not just a matter of the blank slate social conditioning. It's you can't have a society without these very ideas of masculinity and femininity existing to begin with. Therefore, gender needs to actually have an assignment with sex for a good reason.
Well, I was just going to ask if you think that means that it should be gender specific. Like,
Yes,
why can't
it
we
should
just
be.
hold these values within society?
Because I just explained why. If it is the case that men decided to not be courageous anymore tomorrow, then the social ramifications in society would deteriorate so quickly that there would not be a society at all. However,
I agree. Our gender roles are more than just societal pressures or norms. It's a matter of duty for survival and preservation. Without masculine and feminine roles, we would go extinct.
or if women stopped having the same courage that men did, let's say for perhaps confronting intruders or storming the battlefield or whatever it is, the social conditions inside of society would deteriorate far less. And so it's actually necessary for the sexes who can actually accommodate these goals and deeds to have these actual traits associated with their sex, because they're the only ones who can really accommodate them.
Okay. My take is just that perpetuating those ideas is pretty limiting to the human experience, because then you wouldn't have women who feel masculine and go into male dominant roles. And I think that's just limiting to the human experience. I don't think that.
Yeah, but do you understand why it would be so bad for us to take women and then try to make them masculine by moving them towards roles that they're not even biologically equipped for?
But I'm not suggesting we do that.
Yes, you are.
I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm suggesting that there are people, well, this isn't a suggestion, there are people who exist outside of this gender.
Yeah, but what you're describing is the minority of people out there, the less than 10%. We're having a conversation about the general public here.
Heteronormative binary
So
with
what?
these traits.
So what? Why do you think it's a good idea to take society and the social roles that are inside of society and turn them all upside down to accommodate 0.5% of people?
I'm not
Exactly.
I'm not asking for those roles.
Yes,
to
they
be
are.
turned upside down. I'm just
Yes,
saying,
you
why
are.
are we not accepting of women?
Because
Oh shit, grandma's based. I didn't even know that.
we have to accept men in our, I'm sorry, I will never accept a fucking man who has an Adam's apple dressed as a woman, say he's going to come in my space as a woman and take over my shit. I'm not. You know what? My mother and grandmother burned their bras for women's, and what the fuck is this waves of feminism? Feminism is 1965, man. Okay? When we, and we have the laws, Title IX,
You sound like a very loud
you're going to keep fucking men in your spaces. You're going to keep men in your bathrooms. You're going to keep men in your spaces, and we're going to keep women in our spaces, and that's it. I'm sick of this bullshit. Stop it. You know what? All this is liberal fucking propaganda bullshit that we have to accept a man being a woman. Really? Does your little Adam's apple go away when you decide you want to have tits and a fucking pussy getting your fucking dick cut off?
Shit, Granny's going hard in the paint.
Oh, no, you're still a man and you always will be. That's it. And you know what? You're not going to come in my rights. You're not going to come in my spaces. And that's it.
Sorry.
You got mental illness and get help for your mental illness. Enough with this bullshit, this propaganda crap. That's all it is. I'm happy,
Couldn't have said it better myself.
man. I'm 52. Yeah, I know. A lot of shit has changed for a lot of years. But you know what? This crap, no. When it gets down to brass tacks, yeah, I don't need this psycho babble. Okay? No.
That was the perfect word. Psycho babble.
A man's a man, a woman's a woman. That's it. And no man can have a fucking baby, and that's it, man.
Yeah, but that actually makes the best point for the lack of...
I don't care if it makes the best point. That's the common logical point. Okay, we're getting back to common sense. Enough of this bullshit. Okay? Oh, you want to twist the fucking psychological around to make a man be a woman? Really? Can they? Can you?
I don't think he's not disagreeing with you.
We were,
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Well,
We were about to hear his response.
Well,
I'd love
thank
to
you.
hear it. Can we hear it? Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
don't know, considering that I'm one of the largest anti-trans proponents in the fucking United States.
Well, thank you. So am I.
I don't know why the fuck you would associate that with me, but okay. So anyway,
why are you yelling at him?
I'm not yelling at him. I'm sticking my head in the microphone. Is what I'm doing.
After you've read my essay, I think we can just both agree
all of a sudden I'm yelling now.
That we have fundamental differences.
You were yelling. I just I don't care if you want.
I put my mouth in the microphone, just like Brian said. Yeah, put your mouth in the microphone.
Yeah, but you're shouting into the microphone, though. You not see that?
So yeah, back to this. She makes one of the most valid points that she makes is the idea of reproduction, right? It's like only one sex can reproduce and has control over reproduction. That's women. You agree that that's true. Since that's the one role that they can do that men can't do, you would think that you would want to socially be promoting reproduction, unless you were an antinatalist and you didn't want reproduction.
It's
and it
not
is the case that most feminists I've talked to are very much antinatalist. It's baked into feminism itself.
Yep, it's a major proponent. Anti-family, anti-baby.
Anybody give me a definition of a woman? I can give it. I can.
Can we listen to them speak? I don't mean to be rude.
I just had a moment, a silent moment.
In the middle of a discussion.
They're debating.
I would say it's an adult human female. Yeah. That would be a woman, an adult human female.
I just think.
Well, there is a definition, but anyway.
I just think that's fundamentally.
That's the actual definition, adult human female. That's the actual definition of a woman. Yes.
No, it's a human that menstruates. Because any human that menstruates from the age of 9 to about 45.
No. So you're saying that women who can't
now you can't have a baby. Maybe you can have a baby. That's whether, but you do menstruate. No fucking man menstruates.
You won't be able to menstruate. Well,
does a man menstruate? Does a man menstruate?
No, of course not.
Of course not.
Of course not. But lady, the reason your definition is silly is because in a few years you probably won't be able to menstruate. Well,
I already do. I'm 52. I'm menopausal. See, that's natural.
Oh, so then you're not.
That's
a woman
natural.
By your definition.
Yes, I am a woman. It's called natural.
Well, but you just said you have to menstruate to be a woman.
Well, from about 9 to about 45, yes. So and you know this to be true. You're married to a woman, right?
So by your definition, you're not a woman because you don't menstruate.
You know what? Come on now. Biologically, stop twisting the biological. You know, I mean, to about 50. Yes, you are, because menstruation, yes.
The biggest problem is like, even when we have...
Because if a woman can't have a baby, it doesn't matter if you can have a baby out of that menstruation. You are still a woman.
Like, from my side of it, even when I have people who agree with me, one of the biggest things that I have to deal with is that you present the argument...
Oh, I'm supposed to agree with you? And yeah, I'm arguing with you.
But you're not letting him speak at all. You're not even paralleling what he's saying.
Stop putting that cigarette up to your fucking face.
Stop it. Get some help.
Are you drunk?
Where did you find this lady? From the pits of hell?
Drunk? There's something wrong.
You don't. I mean, are cigarettes that offensive to a prostitute?
I'm not a prostitute, bro.
You're on OnlyFans.
Are you on OnlyFans?
So it's not OnlyFans is a prostitute. There's a lot of other things that goes on OnlyFans than that.
Nasty bitch.
Are you doing those other things, or are you showing your boobies for money?
I can't believe she's doing OnlyFans. Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, why don't you subscribe and find out?
Yeah.
Hell no.
Yeah, so that you're doing that, exactly. So that's the thing is don't lie to me and say you're not a prostitute when you're a prostitute.
That's not a prostitute. A prostitute is somebody fucking somebody for money, actually having sex somebody for money. You know what? You guys want to twist narratives. That's what this liberal bullshit is. That's why the liberal bullshit took over the media. Yeah, that's why Sponge Brain Shit Pants was hidden for 4 fucking years. You know, because the liberal media, all of a sudden, we got to be programmed to what we say on fucking socials. Hello?
She's making conservatives look real bad right now.
Hello? I'm sorry, I'm 52. I don't give a fuck, man. I don't give a fuck.
Okay.
I don't give a fuck if he is liberal.
He's conservative.
I don't think he's liberal whatsoever.
You know what? I should have been on here when Charlie Kirk was on here. I wish I should.
He's literally
oh my God.
They have the same views. They're both conservative.
I love you, but he's not liberal whatsoever.
Well, at any rate.
Loud noises!
What the fuck? All right.
It's an open discussion, right?
That got hijacked.
Well, by definition, a discussion means you speak and you listen. And
I've been doing that. I've been silent the whole fucking time.
Yeah,
man.
but I don't think
She won't even let these guys finish a sentence before she has to say something.
you know what Andrew's position is. It doesn't seem like you know what Andrew's even saying.
I responded to him.
But you guys are in agreement and you're responding as if you disagree with him.
I do disagree a little bit. A little bit.
Have you heard anything he said?
About what? What could you ever disagree with me on?
You did kind of call him liberal, and he's literally
not liberal. I'm not a liberal. Well, I'm not a liberal either.
He's actually not liberal. Have you watched the show?
That's why it's very important to not let your emotions get the best of you. It'll literally make you deaf.
That's what I call a chain reaction.
Manifest my own destiny. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The perfect recipe. May they remember me. My words will live on. I'm guided by an energy, a flame. Hold it close to you. Check out my melodies. It's the media that's been leading you. I'll show you a thing. Misdirection, what's the message? They don't want you to win.
As much as we all like to rip on men, this is time to take some accountability.